So to continue on the symposium, we had obviously a very incredible group of speakers and a discussion in the earlier session. And we're going to take a little bit of a turn, but I think one of the reasons why we decided to get this illustrious panel here is because there are what we would refer to as academics, but go far beyond that. And you saw some of that with Philippe's work. And so maybe we'll just start with each individually going through sort of a quick introduction and the type of work that you do, where you are, and yeah, maybe I'll start with David.
Do I need this? Yes? Okay. David Gerber. Thanks, Robert. I'm a faculty at the University of Southern California, primarily in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department and another appointment in architecture. I run an undergraduate program, a graduate program, and I also work on the startup ecosystem for the engineering school.
Hi. Is it on? Yeah. Hi. My name is David Andres Leon. I am the director of the Masters in Advanced Computation for Architecture and Design Master's Program in IAAC. And I also do consultancy on all these sorts of tools for AEC. And happy to be here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Dennis Shelden, Associate Professor of Architecture at Rensselaer Polytech, and as of January 2020, I'm the Director of the Center for Architecture, Science, and Ecology, or CASE, which has a long history in the city with people like yourselves. And so CASE is a research, education, and sort of industry engagement center based in Brooklyn, an industry city that focuses on technology, sustainability, and transformations of practice.
Hi, I'm Tom Hanrahan. I am founding partner at HMA, practicing architect. I was also Dean of Architecture at Pratt Institute from 96 to 2020, where I am now a professor teaching. And so as a practitioner and as an academic, leading research teams as well as teaching, we've been, very involved in kind of a range of projects that are more applied research to kind of blue sky research. And in my practice, I'm very interested in kind of net zero buildings, sustainability, as well as affordable housing. So I guess in theory, I'm qualified to bridge the gap between academia and practice. So we'll see.
So I think, again, one of the interests that we have, we talked a lot about R&D in the process and how it impacts our professional practice and what we do today, what we do, in the future. So I would say, one of the questions that I have here is, you all have very deep backgrounds within the industry, with academics, but also within professions. How would you describe your pedagogy currently in your practice, in your industry, in your universities? And potentially, how has it changed over the years? And that's a question for everybody.
Shall I go? Or should we start with the D?
I know it. Always the downside, right? Yeah, thanks, Robert. And Robert is, he's been involved with Pratt, so he doesn't need my answer necessarily, but it's great to see so many people in this room with connections to Pratt. It was originally founded, well over 100 years ago as a design institute, a technology and design institute, a kind of polytechnic institute, which was supposed to, in fact, bridge the gap between practice and academia, therefore, kind of applied knowledge, applied design, and to appeal to a very diverse kind of group of students, obviously founded in Brooklyn. And I think we've carried that mission forward right now over the last, 20 years or so. We've kind of been on three tracks, I guess, academically. One is which is more process-oriented, teaching-oriented methodology. It's called pedagogy, for those of you in the game, so to speak, and it really just creates teams of students and consultants. We actually have engineers and consultants, specialists, facade consultants, MEP engineers, structural engineers, teaching with architects in the studio, creating, really nicely resolved projects. Is that innovation? We think it plants the seed for innovation. Like I said, many students have grown up to become amazing innovators and practitioners with that kind of seed in their mind. In addition to that, we have, two kind of research wings. One is, like I would call applied research, which is some of the things that I'm personally interested in, obviously net zero buildings, sustainability, both at a kind of building and urban scale. We look at materials, full-scale construction. We've also looked at the areas of kind of robotics, and that is leading to and kind of directing us toward maybe more kind of blue sky research, say, that involves machine learning. And that's kind of the third direction, third research, and that second area of applied research that involves grants and projects and deliverables and doing things for groups and agencies. And then this third thing is more the blue sky research. We have several people just kind of trying to do stuff that's like way out there, deals with mathematics, geometry, theories of nature. They think applied research is not research, and so we have this kind of debate, and that could be something to discuss a little bit. And that's leading us again toward just trying to ask some questions right now about AI, trying to think about what the relationship is between a more robust kind of model and the current sort of state of affairs, which is really just data crunching and image making. So it's kind of where we're at.
Okay, I guess I'll, so CASE, I think has always been a kind of a unique educational model. Again, back in the early mid-2000s, it was a center of research, applied research that did a lot of building projects and also had a very strong relationship with Skidmore and Merrill, and really was founded on that relationship. So the translation from academia and professional practice has always been part of that. I've had a background both as a practicing architect, engineer, and technology startup entrepreneur and CTO. So I've kind of brought that side of, let's say, the business models and value proposition of the industry to CASE. And so I would say that, we are trying to do something unique, which is, it is a research-driven, applied research methodology that tries to engage in professional practices and entrepreneurship as kind of the core of the educational model. And today there are probably 4 startups that are emerging out of student projects everywhere from the undergraduate to the PhD level. And I guess to crack this open a little bit, I think both the building industries and academia are going through kind of a slow motion car crash transformation, right? We know that the traditional models of academia are evolving. Peak undergraduate student in the U.S. was 2009. So the number of kind of traditional students are slowly going down, while I think the imperative for continuous education, lifelong learning, workforce development, cross-pollination between professional firms, companies, and academia. I think there's a nucleus of something really interesting, and it's continually evolving in ways that I think are both frightening but also kind of consumable at the pace that it's going. So we'll talk about that more in a bit, I guess.
I think for my case, we also start from a little bit of a vantage point, because I have to tell you a little bit about the program so that you understand. And MACad, which is a master's that I mentioned for short, we call it MACad, kind of started already with setting up this agenda to impart education to professionals and not to bachelor students, because being an online program, we managed to actually reach out to people abroad, and sort of organically also we got with more people being involved from professional profiles, and that also implied people that were willing to contribute from their expertise to the program, and therefore creating more of a bond from academia and research. Also, from the get-go, the idea was that the tools that we teach were very practically applied research, starting from sustainability tools and basic computational design to facing paradigms such as BIM, digital technologies paradigms in BIM, very practical stuff, interoperability, web development, a little bit of that, intercollaboration, so that the students basically from undergraduate, coming to the masters would actually have to feel the pain of what it is to actually being involved in digital technologies in this world. And then afterwards also a little bit of machine learning and AI as well, as something that we think is very promising, kind of something impossible to leave behind probably in the terms of digital technologies and computation nowadays. But all of that basically focused on applied research, on things that you could actually apply in the office, being the fact that we had these profiles already coming from industry. We have to somehow cater to that need. So it was kind of easy in that sense to bridge the gap because it was sort of implied already from the conception of the program.
I think I'm probably a little bit more in the university setting that's quite traditional, actually, and in a sense conservative, in the sense that we have we're an R1 institution in American terms, so we're very focused on winning research dollars. That's actually the primary metric, and so it's really actually a great question. How do we integrate our students into practice and industry, and how do we, vice versa, bring them in? Because much of our faculty really doesn't care about industry because they're doing pure research. I actually think the ETH model is fantastic, and the Stuttgart model is really a fantastic thing that we're trying to emulate, quite frankly, because we are stuck in that traditional sense. We have to address the ABET accreditation, and so when we make changes, they're not so easy to make, or we have to address the NCARB and NAB things as well. However, on the positive side, what we are doing is we have a new focus, a strategic vision, which is focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. It's nothing sort of new with the folks on this panel. But of course, that comes with funding. Sometimes it's internal funding, thank God, because that's actually what drives the opportunities for our students to not only achieve these accredited programs and all of the hardcore courses they have to do, but also gives them a little bit of a capital to test. And we're really encouraging that culture of it's okay to fail. And bringing in experts across the value chain. And I think that's one thing that we're doing fairly uniquely, which is we bring in venture capitalists to talk to our students. We bring in lawyers to talk to our students. We try to recruit everybody in this room to come and give talks in our programs, all of the professionals, as well as all of the computational designers that are also innovating. So we're trying to amp that up, given the sort of very traditional constraints of an American R1 research-driven university. And we're seeing some progress.
I don't know if it's relevant as a contribution, but I think I am in the most traditional kind of situation. I teach about 800 students in the regular architecture program, so ETH is extremely traditional, both on the engineering and the architecture. And so actually what you refer to is actually a small bubble of researchers within a school, and we even have our own building, so we're no longer in the same building even. And but nonetheless, what I wanted to say in this context is that what I bring in from all of this to the students is just giving them techniques and tools like graphic statics to have structural knowledge from the beginning in their design projects. We also interface as much as capacity allows with design studios, with our very traditional colleagues. And what I find interesting there is that it really does not need to be all or nothing. So you don't need to have everything in BIM and everything with kind of computational methods so that you can plug everything together. We start to talk about interfaces, like interfaces between disciplines, between an insertion of an innovation and things like that. So I like the framework in the sense that it allows me to be able to collaborate, and also with offices with absolutely zero BIM computational geometry skills and so on, and it's another type of challenge. And so these things I'm trying to bring in our teaching. Yeah, and just to give you a sense, right, about 3-4 years ago, I think from my 800 students, maybe a handful knew or could use Rhino. So luckily now we're a little bit better, just to give you a sense. So that's what I'm talking about. But I think it's interesting also to try to then convince the value of innovation and new ideas in such a setting. And that's our context.
So it's interesting because about the traditional and sort of the new, like IAAC is very new, and there's some advantages to that, to sort of wipe the slate clean. But I'm just wondering, again, I came from a very traditional school, and I don't think civil engineering has changed like at all in terms of, well, except at USC. But I will say there's only so much you can fit in a 4 to 5 year period. And there's always a challenge of, are you preparing a student to be a professional, or are you preparing a student to be the best future professional? Like day one, or versus sort of 10 years into your career. So what are your thoughts about that? Because either you add 2 years to the curriculum, or you somehow sprinkle or change the current curriculum such that they're a little bit better prepared for day one.
Go around again. Just to defend even though we've been kind of self-critical of the so-called traditional model of institutions, as a person who had to kind of, sit behind the scenes and try to manage everything, it works on a pretty interesting and kind of fundamental level, and gets to Robert's question too. Whenever the students would show up on the first day of class, we'd always ask, who wants to be a professional and, build buildings? Like, 95% raise their hands. Who wants to get a master's? Like another maybe 4 or 5% raise their hands. Who wants to get a PhD? 1 or 2 students raise their hands. So there's a kind of, almost self-organizing principle at work, that the fundamental mission of most educational institutions is to, take students' legitimate and really, passionate interest in building, design, engineering, and really help them fulfill that in the real world. I think I think as professors, everybody takes that kind of mission really seriously. Simultaneously, and particularly, I think, David's comments really interesting too about the R1 institutions as well as RPI, that you have then these kind of, and as well as you have these kind of schools within schools, and I think that's what's wonderful about the more kind of the larger, more diverse kind of ecologies of these larger universities, which has a pretty substantial group of students who are really pursuing their own kind of professional objective. Absolutely, they want to be a professional on day one. Absolutely, and I think we've tried to adjust our pedagogy, which was has been slow to react to kind of reflect that, as I mentioned in my opening comments. But then those schools within schools, they can really thrive, and they have a really nice relationship. And I guess I would leave it to the more experienced researchers to comment on this, that the traditional component prepares the students with these amazing kind of abilities and skills, so that the research units can say, hey, can you help out? And they really can help out. It's a kind of pool of talent and abilities that really supports the kind of research activities. And again, because the interest is to some degree self-organizing, you get these really kind of passionate students that are both kind of capable in terms of their professional abilities, but also have this kind of really deep passion for research and kind of speculative thinking. So that's been the biggest change, absolutely, within our institution in the last 20 years. I think, 20, 25 years ago, that idea of kind of school within a school or specialized unit within this traditional framework kind of didn't exist. It probably existed, again, more at the R1 units, but we've really built that up, and it's a really positive and thriving relationship in that, nothing's really, it hasn't damaged the kind of professional track, and in fact, they kind of support each other, I think, in a very interesting and positive way. So,
how many of you want us to prepare students so that they can do something on day one? Okay, and how many of you would rather have students that we've sort of really given them amazing skill sets, which even you guys don't know how to implement? It's a fair question, right? And therein lies the challenge. So a little bit of a sideways, but directed at this question. We're trying to do both, and it's a challenge, right? And me personally, and I'm actually, I think, Dennis' student, like I'd rather look to the future than just teach what we already know how to do. But then I'm doing a disservice to kind of my secondary clients, which is industry, right? So what do we do in this case? Well, I think just 4 or 5 weeks ago, we had a huge, let's say, forum where we invited Thornton Tomasetti, Walter P. Moore, SOM, all of our structural, it's focused on structures in this case, all of our structural engineering executives to come and basically say what they need. And I think that's an important thing, is we have to foster the dialogue between your immediate needs as industry and how we can then in a sense, engineer our own course and curriculums within our own constraints. Like that dialogue is super important. So I sort of push that onto the audience. Like you have to come and tell us these things that you need. And at the same time, we have all of those pressures that Dean Hanrahan? Tom was talking about. Like we still have to bring in the millions of dollars so that our dean is happy in terms of the research in the future. So we have to do both. I don't think there's a better answer. Some of us are more interested in the wacky stuff, and some of us are more interested in the practical stuff.
So maybe digging a little bit deeper into that, because this is mainly a technology conference. How do you feel technology generally should or shouldn't be part of that equation?
Can I?
Sure,
I think we were discussing about this yesterday and today as well, about whether there's the need or not the need about computational literacy in architecture. Should an architect actually be a master of its domain in design and the kinds of things that the architects are used to do? Or should they start to acquire a computational literacy about what are the tools that they're using to make architecture? Because I think it's my field, but I think it's very clear that the tools that we use usually either constrain or empower the designs that we make. Either by adding some extra layer of analysis, or by adding many other dimensions in BIM, by actually being able to transfer your design from what you think as an architect to an engineer. Is this the scope of an architect now? Is this what they have to learn from the get-go? Or should we actually define these roles very clearly, between architects, specialists, and developers that might actually set up these tools for them to use? I have this pondering question for a long time, especially running this master's program for 4 years already, because the people that come to my master actually kind of crave these knowledge to open the boxes, because the tools that they're using is constraining. So they need to acquire this computational literacy in order to be able to actually incorporate what they need. And that I think is the main driver for at least, I think I have to say again, I have kind of more a mature, we get more a mature student, one that already has been through architecture and has kind of felt the knowledge, the needs from practice, in order to be able to ask for these skills. But still, I don't know whether there's maybe a midpoint in between knowing a little bit enough of technology as an architect, and still not relinquishing all the important knowledge that you need to have as an architect that you used to have beforehand. Because we cannot all be technologists, as architects.
Why not?
That's the question. That's what I ask.
Okay.
What do you think?
So I wanted to come back a little bit to the prior question, just about sort of, are we training students for today, or are we skating where the puck is going, right? And I run a small enough program that's sort of removed enough from the whole NAB thing that I get to be more kind of on where the puck's going. But I also understand that there is a current state of art, and it is I think architectural practice still is sort of run like a kind of, as a profession, it's still sort of a guild, right? Which is, you've got to kind of work your way up, and I think part of the academic accreditation really is about sort of setting that. Just a couple of things. First of all, I'm old enough to have seen kind of the arc of innovation, and I think we are on an exponential trajectory. It's pretty, it used to bother me that the pace of transformation was as slow as it is, but I've started thinking it's actually a good thing. Like, the industry is sort of drip feeding opportunity and innovation at a level that I think we can actually consume it as a community, and this is really one of the main communities, right? But I also want to say that I think there is, students, young, people in their teens and 20s are not uninformed consumers, right? And I think giving them the options to pick career trajectories is part of what we have to do, right? So I think, I think we have to operate across that spectrum. I also think, we are at the beginning, and maybe I love to believe this, but we are at the beginning of some really cataclysmic transformations that if you're a 20-year-old and you're looking at a 40-year career in the built environment, I think it's fair to say radical disruptions will come, and they will keep coming at a quicker pace. So I think if you're in the business of education, you have to factor that in, that our business model is changing. The dynamic of knowledge is also changing, right? This whole, I would say up until the turn of the 21st century, if you pulled the book out of a 1950s structures class, you could pretty much teach from that. And I think we are looking at, I'm continually refreshing my classes almost every semester. And I think that's part of the equation for students is they're more comfortable with that, and I think also more freaked out, but more comfortable with the continual churn of innovation than the pedagogical structures are prepared to provide. So I think, allowing students the flexibility to go to computer science, to go to cognitive science, to go to humanities. I mean, in some ways, I think we actually have to kind of go back to that more Renaissance-based approach and just kind of open the palette of opportunity and have students with the guidance of career academics, but also as much cross-pollination with the industry to pick their own ways through it.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments to kind of follow up on Robert's question, but also some other comments that were made. That it was interesting to see the show of hands, the gap between what students may know when they get out of class or when they get out of their program, and what professionals expect, and really the bigger picture, the kind of longer term expectations for what constitutes a person who can perform at a very high level. And it really, I think, that's part of, I think, what always has to remain a kind of fundamental mission, which is that issue of kind of being able to critically assess and critically think about your profession, as well as all the kinds of technologies that are coming at you. That said, it seems like students are very aware of cataclysmic changes that are coming, and they are more interested, at least it seems from my perspective, again, kind of in the trenches now as a professor, that they're more interested than ever in emerging technologies, and technologies with a kind of they're asking questions like, why should we be using this technology? Where can it go to kind of benefit people, society? I think the technological sort of explosion, the digital, explosion 25 years ago or whatever now just seemed to be kind of like, hey, look at all this cool stuff we can do. But students are both, much more interested in technology for technology's sake, but also asking questions that are kind of across the spectrum of what we might consider architecture, engineering, design, sustainability, all those kinds of things. And I think it's I can't help but think it's an extremely positive thing, because it also leads, again, from a student's perspective, to all these different paths they can take in the future as kind of designer, technologist, engineer, architect, et cetera.
So that's a great cue to the next question, which is, I know that an engineer's curriculum is packed, right? 134 credits, and in 4 years. But my favorite classes were the non-engineering classes, actually, psychology, music, and anthropology, and things like that. So on the point of critical thinking, do you think there should be an additional sort of requirement for classes that, in the arts, humanity, business? Business is probably the most important one, but because it's a very small little piece of today's curriculum?
I mean, again, I run an undergraduate program in civil engineering, which with the title of building science, which is actually the civil engineers that also take 6 architectural studios. And to your point, I have no units to spare. And it's one of the fights that I've been fighting for 6 years, is figuring out how to bring more fun into their lives. Having said all of that, yes, all of these other courses are really important. They need to be synthesizers, especially as, going back to the last question, where technology is actually a mainstay of everything that we do, and a lot of the things that we used to get paid for will be automated away. It's a big topic of discussion for many years when I was at Arup with the structural engineers in particular. And if we're not giving them the computational skill set, as well as the first principles design skill set, as well as some outside of the box experiences, we're not doing our job. So that is the challenge that we face, and I think, you know, we're doing an okay job. We can always get better. But going back to the previous question, I feel strongly that we would be doing a disservice if we are not bringing computation and technologies into every single opportunity from our very first year. So I've been fighting for years to get rid of, you know, the curriculum or the people that are teaching for me that won't teach Rhino, for example. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, we are not using paper anymore. I know. Or the big challenge for our curriculum right now is the integration of data sciences and machine learning at basic levels. But then when it gets into mechanics and other things at more complex levels, and when it's in the design studio through Grasshopper and things like that, we have to be doing these things, and it does mean that the old guys have to stay fresh. And I'll stop there.
Can I say just one thing here?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm just going to say I am one of them already.
Oh, I definitely am.
I forgot what I was going to say. Actually, I think that kind of thinking goes beyond architecture. No, this kind of technological thinking that is demanded from you nowadays, because whether you're an architect or designer or not, you're somehow now more and more involved with technologies, with AI, with machine learning, I mean, the subject of data, for example, such a big controversial subject. No?
We're not going to go there all the way today. We'll be here all night.
I'll stop there. I said I was going to keep it quick, but I think it should be, this conversation can expand beyond architecture totally, you know? I mean, from wherever you come from, you should have some type of technological literacy nowadays to understand where's your data going, what are you doing with your phone, what's happening behind the scenes, no?
Yeah,
my 2 cents.
So I have a question for actually Philippe. You know, everyone saw the amazing work and journey that he's gone through with his team. How do you know, so you have a lot of graduate students. I don't know how many there are, but probably the most in the world for that. So how do you, you know, put your students in a trajectory that you think is the right trajectory in terms of art research and development, pure research? Right trajectory. Yeah, I mean, at some point, the professors at ETH Zurich have to say yes or no. You're on the right track or you're not on the right track. So I guess is there a process, or is it just, you know, do you let your students sort of go wild?
You mean our researchers?
Yeah, PhD students. Yeah.
It's very tough being a PhD student with us right now because the more we go into practice, the more we feel a responsibility and an urgency to actually deliver meaningful kind of strategies and so on. And so we ask all our PhD students to be extremely explicit and clear, even when it's fundamental research, what the outlook and what actually the relevance is. And I think there, if I can be self-critical to our entire academic environment, you have a lot of extremely smart people that are doing extremely random things. And so and it's a sad reality, and if people go to the same conference as I go to, you probably are internally nodding or visibly nodding. And so what we try to do is just be clear what you're contributing, and so we use frameworks like the one that I showed in the beginning to be very explicit about this, also explicit about scalability and so on. But it's a crazy tough straitjacket because how do you I've maybe become a little bit too pragmatic and kind of almost cynical or critical about this, but I think our type of research has not the freedom anymore to be open-ended and kind of not applied enough and not have a clear target. And so the challenge is how to keep creativity open, but nonetheless be very clear that you are delivering something meaningful. So that in that sense, I think our graduates, well, I don't know if that's a good a good metric, but 90% of them are professors at big universities. So actually, maybe what I'm hoping to do, they're not achieving because they're going in academia instead of making an impact in practice. But yeah, that's what we ask from them, and we are very tough, and we are not forgiving, and we are even preventing them to present their research proposals, even though I would know that they would all pass. They will not pass our scrutiny if they don't know why they're doing it and what they want to have as an outlook. And so I have not said much in the discussion because in the beginning I thought that everyone needed computation and so on, because that is how we do it. I believe more that we need that actor in between. Architects, they have already enough things to care, engineers as well, but someone that is a computational glue in between and brings it all together. That's maybe what I believe we need to go towards. But I'm not managing at ETH at all. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The architects are protecting their expertise and realm. They are not interested. The engineers, same. And they see my suggestion of an additional actor in this very complex kind of getting buildings as a threat for their own kind of fields and probably future fees in the project. So that's why I didn't say much, because I have not figured out how to do it. And I'm not giving up yet, because I have a sabbatical coming up, and hopefully that will give me the energy to come back and to try again. So
a couple months at a spa, and you'll just have a whole different outlook on life. And just those are interesting comments, because just they followed on that very brief statement I made about to be cautiously optimistic. And again, some of our professors use the word speculative, other people's might call it random. So it's interesting to, and that is a real tension, and that's why I think the comments are super interesting and right on the point. But I do think, to be cautiously optimistic, there's a kind of emerging sensibility, I think, both among the professors, but definitely among the students, again, facing the kind of disruptions that are absolutely coming, whether it's machine learning or climate. The students are asking, I think, they're asking for more specific outcomes that technology, I think, and learning in universities can deliver. And I think that is a kind of broad change of attitude from the emergence of just, digital technology, which is, hey, look what we can do. So I think the focus is, or the foci are emerging, but absolutely, I think the kind of tensions that you spoke about are very real and kind of a drag. One last comment, Robert. I have a friend who's not part of the, maybe this is not part of the symposium here, but he was trained as an engineer. He wanted his son to be an engineer. His son is finishing up French literature at a liberal arts college, and he said to me the other day, liberal arts education really works. I mean, my son can walk and talk, and he knows politics and computation. He speaks French,
yeah.
and so.
The reason why I brought that up is because I've seen a trend over the years that, on the flip side, that the people that come out 100% ready for work are basically the world's best robots that can hit the buttons on all the machines. But 5 years in, they're still hitting the robot. They're still hitting the buttons, and that's become their skill. So that's why it's a tension. There's no real answer there. But I guess my point is that I think the world is a big place out there, and with automation and AI and machine learning, even more so. That the critical thinking aspect is critical. I want to get back to, before you open up to questions, is we've been asked over there, and SOM had a good model actually of teaming professional practice with research. I haven't seen a good model really other than that, and there's an investment on both sides. What are your thoughts about that? Because I think there's something there. I just don't know if there's a model that we can all use.
Well, so first of all, I mean, I think CASE is all in on this, right? I mean, we come from a research, a research trajectory. We are sort of beholden to that trajectory of funded research, et cetera. But I think, the reason we're in New York City is to engage with to bring a design-focused research model to a professional community. And I think we're having pretty good success at it. So we have, visiting programs from undergraduates who come that we try to tie to some of the research we're getting from either industry or from funded research. We have a master's program, which is a year-long research-based pedagogy that we're hooking in with professional partners. I do think that, having worked in professional practice in tech, that academia does have sort of unique affordances that neither firms nor startups, no matter what the capitalization and funding is, academia among its, one of the things that's great about academia is it's relatively frictionless, right? You can go into a completely new topic with an undergrad in an undergraduate research program for 3 hours a week for one semester. Or, the cadence of a real development cycle is like 1 year, So on the downside, I think it's very hard for academia to keep the kind of the flywheel going. So it's a lot harder. I found it harder to kind of take the startup kind of software development model into academia because it just doesn't have the kind of critical mass to actually do that kind of scale of innovation. But, again, I think, and I would say reciprocally, I think it's incredibly hard for professional firms to really do research because there's always the kind of the tyranny of the urgency, billable. I'm sure, we don't. Your model, I think, Core Studio is one of the most unique kind of, but you still are bridging this kind of investment for the future against I got to pay the bills today. And I think there is something that academia provides that can really sort of accelerate that. Yeah. And, I think, again, the historical model is, you train up a student, you get an agency to pay you to generate IP, and then you flip it to a company along with the student, right? And I think that traditional funding model of academic research is evolving, but there is something to be said about, we can just launch innovation research projects kind of on a whim and never, it's not a hard decision, right? To sort of pursue something, and there's also a life cycle of that innovation. So I think it is a model that behooves professional practice and also to some extent software and development tech companies to engage with academia.
Yeah, I'm asking the question because even at our firm, look, time is limited. It's aside from the money issue, there's just the time. Many of the people that are interested in research and professional practice are usually the people that are really good and don't have the time to actually spend, hundreds of hours doing research. So, but if they're at least fostering that research with an idea in mind, with the help of a university, that's really what I was getting to because it's, it's not really the dollars so much, although that's a big issue. It's time.
I mean, to further what Dennis said and to respond to something you just said, I think communication is key between an academic and a potential industry partner. Like, you have to understand each side of the fence. I think that takes time, so there's a billable hour. And actually, the financial model is key. Yeah. Because if you don't decouple the expectations that a practice has, which is hitting milestones and deadlines and meeting client needs and contracts, from what the academic sort of free will, lack of flywheel issue, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So I think communication, long-term objectives, which is talent or maybe IP or influence or tax write-offs, whatever they are, like they have to be communicated up front to build a culture where you're accepting of each other's issues. Yeah. That's what I found. And it also is very different working in Europe versus working in the United States, and even working in the Swiss market. Like they're all a little bit different because we spend different amounts of money on education.
So with that, we have a few minutes to open up for questions for this great panel. So yeah, please use the microphone and so that people online, and put it close, according to your own.
Is it better?
Yeah, this is
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
Good.
So thank you for your time, and shout out to Sunny Buffalo for not making me a robot. My question to you, you guys is, I think touching back on the old topic of open source things, being in academia, you know, what's your opinion about using open source things to train students instead of like commercial products? That kind of encourages that part. And the second question is like, what's your also opinion about open sourcing the research part, especially a lot of code that is developed in-house, you know, a lot of testing things that you guys do. Being a structural engineer, I've read a lot of good articles where I'm trying to model things up, but it's so hard to get like, you know, part of research they've already done, and then it's also the same cycle goes again where I'm building the same things from scratch part again. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, thanks for leading. I wanted to mention that earlier, indeed, that I think towards your question about what are we educating, if you have indeed resourcefulness and a habit to go look for solutions, and an open source culture is essential there, then I think that is most powerful. And I think that I see it, at least how we do things. We are still, I mean, yeah, you have to get some base skills and some first principles, and of course you have to teach those things. But then I witnessed too much teaching of specific tools, specific software, specific kind of approaches, and not what you're suggesting, more kind of an ability to actually be resourceful. But for that you do need that open sourceness, and that goes actually in everything. If you look, for example, at publishing, this double blind, and then you have kind of a frustrated older colleague that thinks that you're reinventing the wheel while not understanding that these are new things, and then your papers get cancelled. Well, if you look at Stack Overflow, where millions of people are kind of pushing your contribution up or down and so on, that is much more meaningful. So I think not only open source, but just community-based kind of education, research and so on is needed. And again, that is what we are in our small steps trying to do with Compass, is to everything that I've shown, you can actually find the algorithms, the frameworks, how we do this on Compass. And so we do that. But again, I guess I'm a bit not very positive today, but academia doesn't reward these things, because it's a new model actually of also how do you assess then your ability of being resourceful? How do you assess your impact if it's not a typical bean counting, H index and so on and so on? But you release a software that doesn't come with a paper, but helps thousands of others as a stepping stone for others. So I think you're spot on with your hint that open source could be the big shift towards that, right? And,
yeah, so I mean, I think it's a huge question, and I think it talks about I think open source is kind of a stand-in term for a lot of ideas about deployment of intellectual property in new ways, right? And academia is definitely in having growing pains around a traditional model of intellectual property monetization and changes that. I've always thought that academia actually is an open source business model in the following sense. We publish papers, and we kind of give that knowledge away for free, with the idea that that will attract new business. And the new business can be in terms of grants, or it can be in terms of students' rights. So open source to me is like, I mean, there's a lot of models of it, but the basic idea is it's a service model masquerading as a product. And I think academia actually, and again, this came up in the last session, but what's remarkable about today and the infrastructure of innovation and the web is that one innovator can make a huge outsized contribution in terms of impact that, on a broader culture and on a broader community that just wasn't, you could be the world's best at a discipline, and within a very small community, you could excel. But today, I think you have the ability to deploy innovation at vast scales without a lot of, scaling of effort, right? And I do think, again, academia, this came up around Linux, right? I mean, a lot of these open source projects initiate in academia, and then, but they also take care in feeding, right? So, so some of them die because people just, the funding dries up or whatever. But I think that basic question about how do you deploy innovation at scale with little effort, and what can academia do in that mix, and how do we engage with the community is central to the future of where academia is going.
Can I maybe really quickly rebuttal that? Ideally, yes, I agree that we give a lot of things, but how many papers and results and is really reproducible and really kind of then usable by others? And then we come back to to one of the comments earlier, that what are then for our industry the relevant standards, the relevant format, the relevant, and I mean, no one is agreeing because everyone is developing their own in-house kind of expertise, and that already costs so much effort that you're not wanting to necessarily share all of that. You're not wanting to start over or to think of a new kind of and so on and so on. So ideally, yes, and to a certain extent, certainly in the ideas, yes. But if you critically look at the papers that come out in our fields, they're not reproducible. They're also not transparent. So the level of really building up is very limited. And again, that is why I reacted like I did there, that we do have to make that shift because it's not happening today.
I just want to add something very quickly, because I think I agree with Philippe about this, maybe being the utopian vision of academia, being probably all collaborating for the same cause, very, very sincerely peer reviewing each other's papers and such not. But I think it's more about, in the end, really publishing being somehow the currency for academia. It becomes a true competition in between institutes, and maybe therefore such a disguise. No, in my opinion, it's more about kind of implementing a logic that whatever you're doing, you're someone said it before, like standing in the shoulders of giants. No, you sometimes use software that might be proprietary, might be open source. A lot of that you don't even understand to do your own work. No. For example, when you're dealing with more advanced topics like machine learning or AI, all of that, all of those algorithms that you're consuming, they're kind of given to you, openly available to you to do fantastic stuff, and you don't realize it. So I think it's more about kind of implementing this sense of reciprocity, in what you do. That you're basically standing already from a higher ground, and whatever you do, it's just basically because you have this standing base already to begin with.
One last question before
Yeah,
we go
so
to lunch.
It seems to me that with both the pace of technological change and the urgency of the crises that we face, we need not just training of the next generation of practitioners, but we need retraining of the existing generation of practitioners. I mean, I'm thinking about, I saw an article this morning that we're going to hit 1.5 degrees C this decade. And so basically we need Philippe's technology in the hands of every practitioner in the world tomorrow. So I'm wondering if academia has a role in that, and if software has a role in that, and what would be the ideal software partner for you guys to engage in re-education of the rest of the world?
I'll just jump right in. I think that's a really, really great question. And I think academia does have a role to play, but so does industry, because at the end of the day, whether we're a public institution or private institution, somebody has to pay for that reskilling, right? So we have graduate programs that are perfectly designed to deal with data, technology, integration, sustainability. In fact, they're designed for today. But you guys need to say, okay, do we want to reinvest in our people if you're a firm? or we have to have young people making the decision on their, or mid-career people making the decision on their own. So I think, yes, we have a role to play, but again, it comes down to dollars and cents in my opinion.
Yeah, let me resonate with that. So first of all, yeah, one thing that the evolution of CASE is we've wound up being sort of the tech software center of excellence for RPI School of Architecture, and we are downstate. COVID came along, everything went online, and we've kind of stayed online, so we're feeding innovation upstate, and now we are taking the tech courses that we're providing and we're packaging them. Rensselaer has a new program, Rensselaer at Work. We're not unique, right? So I think that broadcasting of really backed by the kind of the foundational academic model, but bridging out to professional lifelong learning is something that we're very heavily invested in. I will say that, yeah, I mean, there are models, as I talk to the firms out there, that are and are not resonating. And I think I would, maybe this is where David is going, I'd put it a little bit stronger. I have been told, full stop, yeah, interesting, but we don't invest in the education of our people, right? I mean, that's something they do on their side, or, because we're just gonna, I don't know, I mean, I think I would, there was a historical model where, the Northrop Grummans of the world would send their engineers for a master's degree. I mean, RPI really was one of the foundational, we were very sort of engaged in industry research back in the, mid-20th century. I think it's really a question for the leadership of the professional firms, because there's plenty of education out there, and I think there's plenty of demand. And I do think, yeah, if you're not continually educating yourself, I mean, we all have to be continually educating ourselves, and in ways that I think, yeah, I mean, just, to throw out this large language model, we don't know where it's going, but it is going to do something fundamental, right? Yeah. And this is only a year old. There's going to be another one of those possibly every 6 months, Yeah. So I think it's imperative, but I think it's something that academia can't actually solve on its own. So kind of throw that out to you guys to think about.
Yeah, one last question.
Yep. Thank you so much. As a former academic and understanding that architecture historically was a standalone domain, and engineer detached from architecture, and urbanism detached from architecture, what do you think about the permeabilization of computer science into architecture? Is not forcing the natural detachment of computational science as a standalone domain and expertise, that it's going to be detached from architecture?
I have strong feelings about this. And I think related to your question, I sort of disagree with Philippe that there should be that person in the middle. And at the same time, I'm not so naive that we can all be engineers and architects and computer scientists all at the same time. I get it. But I feel like if we're not giving our students, whether they're undergrads, grads, mid-career professionals, the computational literacy, we're doing them a disservice, to Dennis's point, right? We need to always be doing that. And I would put it out there, and hopefully there's not too many computer scientists in the room. Computer scientists do not know how to program, just to be clear. Okay, they research things, but they can't actually, I can't get them to do anything, right? So it's a funny way of saying, like, we all need to be upping our game in terms of integration, right? And integration doesn't mean that I can do what Philippe does, and because I'm not a structural engineer, but it means I can have a conversation productively with Philippe or Dennis through data, through the computer. So I think that's my strong feeling about it.
I think it's a very interesting topic, and maybe one of the core things that I would say is that data scientists especially rely on this domain knowledge to do something meaningful, no? Yeah. And that you can apply to anything else as well. But in terms of architecture and design, one of the most powerful things that you can maybe inject in there as a cross-pollination in between these two domains is basically your own domain expertise into what a computer scientist cannot do, no? And this is what, at least for my students, I teach would be the most valuable thing that they can do. I mean, even after 3 months of engaging with, learning Python and becoming somehow a little bit of playing to be data scientists in 3 months, in the end, they fully understand they're not going to be data scientists, but they have an amazing power in applying these tools into their domain.
So maybe a couple quick things. First of all, computer science is also going through the same wrestle about whether or not, the discipline is about foundational computational algorithmic research or whether or not it's application. And I think there's a wrestle going on there as well. But, they're sort of reaching out as well, right, to us. And I would just say that, I work with some phenomenal leaders of computation. RPI really has a center of excellence in AI and also specifically around ontologies. And I do a lot of work in sort of open data standards for our industry, so there's a lot of cross-pollination there. But I would say, as somebody who is engaging with a polytechnic fundamental research-based enterprise, there is a lot of interest right now from the engineering community in what architecture and maybe by extension, humanities, arts, and social scientists can bring to the table, because again, they are seeing a need for a translation of their research into the world. A lot of these questions are, founded on, sustainability, or, however you term that. You don't have to go very far in sustainability before you hit the built environment, right? So I just would say that I'm seeing a lot of interest from across the sort of engineering research community in the models of design and in the models of sort of engagement with humans, and really in the engagement with the physical world. I think, computation has gone through a virtualization and is now coming back to an engagement in the world, and we're in a really interesting kind of pole position if we get out of our own way and sort of engage with them, and bring what we have to the table. I think there's a big demand for it on the other side of the table.
So with that, there is lunch. So, but wish to thank our speakers here and our panel.